to go someday. Take me to New York, I'd love to see LA. I really want to come kick it with you. You'll be my American boy, American boy.
Hello and welcome to the first edition of Berlin Behind the Scenes. My name is Justin Arisman and I'll be your host as we explore one of the most popular districts of Berlin. This is Wedding. The reason we've decided to focus on Wedding is because one person in my extended family actually came to Wedding and settled here. His name was George W. Miller. George W. Miller. He was my uncle's wife's cousin's grandfather on the maternal side. And being a direct descendant of George W. Miller, I felt that this was an appropriate place to start. Who was he? George W. Miller was a man that can only be described as a revolutionary. He came to Berlin, specifically to the district of Wedding, at a time when absolute chaos was ravaging the streets. What was going on, you might ask? Well, Wedding was being infiltrated by Turks. Why is this a problem? Well, Turks tend to be Muslims. And George W. Miller, my uncle's wife's cousin's grandfather on the maternal side, was a Christian missionary. And he believed it was his duty, his job, to come to Berlin, to come to Wedding, and show these Turks exactly what life was all about. Behind me you can see the Miller Church. In German it's often pronounced Müller Church, but it's the same thing. This church was erected in the year 1859. 1859 was the year that George W. Miller came to Wedding, and he wanted to begin to introduce his missionary practices to the local population. Unfortunately, he wasn't very successful. Instead, he had to reach a kind of compromise. Well, the result was not only amazing, but it led to the current creation of the name of this district, Wedding. In German, pronounced Wedding. Why was it called Wedding? Well, when my uncle's wife's cousin's grandfather on the maternal side originally set up this church, he wanted it to be an example of pure beauty. He wanted to show the people how wonderful a wedding could be. Well, evidently the idea took on, because the local population, the Turks, the Christians, everyone who was involved, thought that the weddings that he produced were absolutely fantastic. And now I'd like to take you on a little tour of the area and show you some of the historical landmarks that bear my uncle's wife's cousin's grandfather on the maternal side's name, George W. Miller. Please join me as we explore.
This is #1 champion sound, yeah, Estelle, we about to get down. Who the hottest in the world right now, just touched down in London town.
So here we are in front of the entrance to the church that George W. Miller helped found. On this board here, we've got some information. It's all in German, but I'll translate for you very quickly. See, in 1893, the church was officially recognized as belonging to the church. Then, in the year 1886, unfortunately, it was burned to the ground. It was a tragic fire that involved something with dyeing of Easter eggs. In the year 1936, they were able to completely refurbish the church. And since then, there have been regular worships that take place every Sunday, Wednesday, and Fridays whenever there's a full moon.
He said, hey sister, it's really nice to meet ya. I just met this 5'7" guy who's just my type. Like the way.
Here's a piece of trivia for you all. Who invented recycling? If you said George W. Miller, 10 points for you. Here we have an example of some of the bins that George W. Miller introduced. Many Germans might not know it, but he was the one that started the institution of recycling. And it's because of him that places like Wedding are now clean and pristine, examples of what the future may look like.
First let's see the West End, I'll show you to my bedroom. I'm liking this American boy.
And here we are at the location of George W. Miller's residence in Wedding. Today, it's a completely ordinary building.
And I know you ain't into all that. I heard your lyrics, I feel your spirit, but I still talk that cat ass. Cause a lot of wags wanna hear it, and I'm feeling like.
Now we come to the highlight of our tour, Müllerstraße, or Miller Street. As you can see, it's as beautiful as its name promises. So we hope that you've enjoyed this edition of Berlin Behind the Scenes. If you would like to send in your suggestions for where we would like to go next week, please do. The choices are Kreuzberg, Neukölln, or Zehlendorf. We look forward to seeing you again next week, and thank you very much for another episode of Behind the Scenes of Berlin.
I'm liking this American boy, American boy. Take me on a trip, I'd like to go someday. Take me to New York, I'd love